Hello everyone, and welcome to day 3 of Decentraland Game Expo. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome you to the first live panel of today. So wherever you're joining in, whether you're joining us in world in Decentraland at 081, you can see us right here in Decentraland Game Expo Plaza, or whether you are going to listen in on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Twitter, X. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome you to our panel. Today we're going to be diving into the big questions. We're going to be diving into profiting in Web3 game economies, understanding supply, demand, and growth. So it's my pleasure that I'm going to be joined here today with Margarita, CMO of MotoDEX, and also Jason Lee, co-founder and chief growth officer of Yomi. And we're also going to be joined by a new panelist for this evening. She's going to be joining us shortly, which is Danny Brown-Wolf, chief of staff at Upland. So Margarita, Danny, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here. Jason, hi. Great.
Hey.
To start us off, I wondered if both of you could introduce a little bit about yourselves and the project that you're currently working on. Margarita, would you like to kick this off for us?
Yeah, hi everyone. Really glad to be here today. I'm Margaret, head of marketing of MotoDEX game. At MotoDEX, we are building an exciting hyper-casual game where users can participate in the thrilling motorcycle races. Yeah, we have our own full-cycle game studio. The MotoDEX game is our main project now, and we have been developing it for more than 3 years. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you
Should I
so
go
much.
next? Okay, you can hear me, right?
I'm sorry, Jason. Yes, absolutely. It was my side. I'm saying, yes, please,
Oh, okay.
Jason, please.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm Jason, co-founder and I guess chief growth officer of Yomi Games, but I also kind of wear a lot of different hats at our studio. And I also do I'm the main person that does our token design as well. And yeah, in terms of my background, quick background about myself, been working in gaming in different roles for the past 15 years. Worked at companies like Warner Brothers. I also worked in investment banking prior to start my career, but working with a lot of game companies like Zynga and others, right, in the past when they were very early on and smaller startups at the time. And yeah, more recently, I was at a pretty large mobile game live streaming platform called Omelette Arcade. That was very big in Southeast Asia and Brazil. I was the head of growth there and grew it from launch from 0 to over 100 million downloads and to 10 million MAU. And then I was also working at Polygon Studios. I was the third hire there. On the BD side, was helping to bring players into web companies and helping them get into Web3 and also do investments as well into them. And yeah, and then I co-founded Yomi Games about 2.5 years ago in early 2022. Yomi Games is a casual game studio, Web3 game studio. We in the past have shipped 3 titles. Our most recent one is called Yomi Block Puzzle, also hyper casual as well. That's live on the app stores on Google Play and Apple, and it's like a puzzle game with earning mechanics into it and some light customization and accessories. And yeah, I'm happy to talk more about it.
I'm really glad to have you on the panel today, Jason. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And Danny, thank you for joining in. We're just introducing. So could you introduce yourself and a little bit about the project that you're currently working on?
Sure. Hi, guys. Danny, I'm from Upland. Upland, together with Decentraland, is one of the more OG gaming platforms that's immersive metaverse. Founded in 2019, has been considered more of a blockchain, Web 2.5, because we didn't have an externally traded token. Although everything in Upland is on the blockchain, whether it's the NFTs or the land. So Upland is right now developing into an entire gaming and leisure ecosystem that is completely immersive. It is mobile first, so we've always had the idea that in order to bring in normal users and not just Web3 users, first thing is meet them where they are, which is mobile. So we have a mobile app at play.upland.me that can be downloaded both on iOS and on Android and Google stores. And Upland, as an open economy, also obfuscated the blockchain wallet and the a little bit of the a hard lap that users have to do in order to start using blockchain and owning their own assets. So everything is obfuscated and feels like a Web2 sign-in. In terms of the gameplay itself, we're a metaverse mapped to the real world. Users can trade properties, complete collections, and then develop either communities or games, or developers have services within Upland that's serving the economy. The open economy also means that we don't have a gaming engine that developers build on, but rather we have REST APIs that any developer, whether they're Web 2 or Web 3 game, can come in and connect to Upland, and Upland becomes kind of like the basis of the economic platform, and is an exploration for other apps as well that connect the user identity and their wallets. In terms of myself, I've been in Web3 since 2016. I actually started with more hardcore infrastructure. I worked at Orbs, which is a layer 2 that did a lot of B2B use cases back in the day when, I don't know how many of you were around in like the blockchain wars, the layer 1 wars of 2000, and I would say like 16, even all the way to 2019, with like IBM Hyperledger telling everyone that blockchain can be private, and we were running the narrative that no, actually all the benefits of blockchain is that it's public, decentralized, and permissionless. So this is really Upland. I've been in Upland for 2 years as chief of staff, managing much of the commercial, so marketing, business development, and growth, and working with the product team on just incentives and integrating different IP, different games. We've worked with FIFA. We were the metaverse for FIFA Men's World Cup in Qatar and Women's in Australia and New Zealand, NFL Players Association. In different brands, and seeing how we can integrate them in an immersive but incentivized, exciting experience for users.
Well, welcome, Danny. Thank you so much for being on the panel. I feel like we've got a really good mix of experiences on the panel this evening. So morning, wherever you are in the world. If you can join us in Decentraland, jump in right now at 0821. You can watch the panel live there. You can also hear us as you walk around the streets of Decentraland Expo Plaza. So there are 26 booths to visit inside the expo, one of which is by MotoDEX. So we're going to take everyone there through this presentation as well. So if you are able to jump in, meet us in Plaza. If not, you can watch us on X, Twitter, and YouTube live right now as we talk about profiting from Web3 game economies. So we're going to dive in immediately to the hard stuff. And the first question is for all of you, in your experience right now, what are the key factors currently driving growth, whether that's adoption, whether that's revenue, in Web3 game economies? So wherever you want to take that, what are the current key factor currently driving growth? And Margarita, I'm going to come to you first. Where do we think we're seeing growth right now?
Yeah, from my experience in Web3 marketing, a significant trend driving growth is the transition from Web2 to Web3 platforms. By moving users from traditional game environments to blockchain-based games, we are introducing them to a more interactive and rewarding experience. Blockchain technology offers benefits such as true ownerships of game assets, decentralized economy, and the ability to earn tokens of NFT in MotoDEX, for example, which are becoming attractive of gamers' deeper engagement and financial incentivize in a Web3 environment. yeah, like that.
So for you with MotoDEX, it's definitely that NFT place that is taking people from Web2 into MotoDEX as an experience.
Yeah, sure.
And how are you getting the message out there? So do you specifically target Web3 to Web2 communities, or are you seeing that organic transition?
Yeah, it's for organic transition. We have a lot of community in TikTok, in Instagram, for example. It's totally audience in Web 2, and we should incentivize them and learn them how to use crypto wallet, how to use our game, what is NFTs, and it's our main focus for now.
That's really interesting. So you're looking at that existing Web2 audience, meeting them through TikTok, Insta, and kind of making that transition easy for them.
Yeah. But I think it's very interesting and something new in the crypto.
Yeah, for me, looking at that TikTok and Insta is a really interesting part. Jason, how about you? Where do you see the growth coming right now?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I'll actually take the opposite end of that. And I think actually, and this is partly, from my own experience playing, these games and kind of taking a look and researching into what are the most, I think, in my opinion, are I think the most successful ones right now, currently in crypto gaming, and also our own experience as a studio, because we actually tried a few different approaches as well, because we published a few different games with different kinds of token models. But I think, but honestly, I have gone back and forth on this. Um, and I think definitely it makes a lot of sense, and we will definitely need as an industry to get more Web2 players coming in, and that will ultimately be, I think, where the true growth of Web3 economies in the long term will come from. But in terms of right now, where we are right now, and kind of like where we will be focusing more as a studio is actually more on the crypto natives. I think at this point currently, my opinion is that it's not huge, but in terms of crypto gaming, there is there is that size now. There's enough people playing these games, interacting with it, buying into these economies. So, and I actually think at the end of the day, that's actually what was the most interesting thing about crypto. Is that it allows you to um, create these kind of really interesting token incentive models that you cannot do in Web2, and also even more critically, people can basically, if they really like the game, they can invest millions potentially into your game, which is not really possible if you were go through the App Store or or Steam, for example, right? You're limited by how much you can spend. So I think that's actually the really cool thing and really interesting thing about crypto. So kind of leveraging into that, I think, and you've seen games like like Pirate Nation or Pixels, right? I think these are some of the more popular games that have done really well, is that they kind of lead more into that kind of Web3 native audience. And and you've seen both in terms of NFT game adoption, in terms of game metrics, engagement, transactions on chain, right? Those have also increased, and even for our own game, Block Puzzle, although it's interesting because it isn't hyper casual game, it is also very Web2 catered. But what we have found, which was kind of surprising, honestly, is that at the end of the day, the biggest and most our most devoted players and the players that really stuck around and contributed most to our in-game metrics is actually the more Web3 native people. Even though we have some, Web2 people that came in, they don't even know necessarily even playing a Web3 game necessarily, because we obfuscated it as well. The most loyal and the ones that spend the most also are actually at the end of the day Web3 natives. Yeah.
So for you, it's a completely different side of things. That's right.
Yeah.
We've tried these two ends. Web3 natives are the ones that stick around and become the most profitable for you right now.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's kind of interesting because when you take a step back and think about free to play in general, and what you're trying to achieve is you're going free to play, you're trying to get as many people in. That's goal one. But the goal of that, the ultimate goal of that, is to winnow down and find your whales, right? If you're thinking about profitability, right, and revenue, that 90%, 95% will eventually churn out and not spend anything, but less than 5%, less than 1% will end up spending money in your game.
So Danny, we've got the two sides. We've got Web2 and we've got crypto native. Where are you seeing the growth right now?
Well, it's funny because well, we don't sleep, so we do both. Uh, we kind of we're at a point that we're big enough that we feel like we can't afford to be one or the other, and we're working in two tracks in parallel, and we keep on experimenting and then seeing, doubling down where we see the right ROAS or the right matrix coming in. So in terms of the web, 65% of our users are never owned an NFT or a token before they came into Upland. So convert. We know that we can bring them in and convert them into Web3. So that's really exciting. And so we never take the foot off the gas in terms of traditional UA. We've seen great success lately in TikTok. TikTok have been a great partner when you have the right creatives. They actually gave us put us in a program. We're the first Web3 company to be in that program, where TikTok gives us free creatives from their creator community, and we keep on testing them, and we spend on whatever we see works with good ones. And as long as we keep on optimizing for the right message, which the message can be a balance also of Web 2 and Web 3, whether it's just talking about the game mechanics and the strategic gaming aspect of it, or talking about the Web3 incentivization models. We're also seeing a mix of the creatives and how they approach different audiences, even on the Web2 UA platforms. On the Web3, we, for example, launched a social airdrop campaign that we had chapter 1 that was super successful, similar to what Pixels did, where we incentivize our users and additional users across Twitter, X, to engage with our account, spread the words. They get rewarded with tokens that were distributed inside of Upland. So that was also a way to bring them in. And they need to use that token inside of Upland for its intended utility in order to be able to take it out. So I think the main message here is that there's growth in both in Web 2 and in Web 3 now for Web 3 gaming. And the more interesting part is actually looking at sustainable growth as opposed to just growth, because we could easily throw a shitload of money into ads in the Far East and get a lot of free users, especially if we incentivize them in to farm our token. But you're seeing across different games that gives you a hype, but then it goes down really bad, and that's not sustainable. And we're here for the long term.
We're going to dive into that sustainability in a second. So these are excellent. So we've got this mixture. We've got Web 2, we've got Web 3, we've got this covering all bases. We've got this sense that 65% of your users didn't own an NFT before Upland. We have this transition, but it's not explicit. It's not, okay, we're onboarding. We're going to dive in a little bit more. But before we do, if you are joining us in world right now, so if you're in 081 and you want to come on a little tour with us, you're still going to be able to hear us talking if you stay on the roads. You can see the MotoDEX brand and build with us right now. So Margarita, if you don't mind, I'm going to jump on the screen, and in the chat box right here, I'm going to put the coordinate for our first tour little visit here. And we're going to be heading to MotoDEX, which is 378. So if you're in world with me right now, you'll see there's a hyperlink in chat. You can just click on it. And we're then going to be teleported to the MotoDEX booth. As we said, there's 26 different booths within the expo itself. Here we go. And I'm going to run around here on the road. So you can see in front of me is the Decentraland Game Expo claw machine. If you're involved in the game quest, you will know that if you visit one of the 4 big games in Expo right now, you gain a ticket to then use to claim wearables in the machine. You can also do the zone quest. So you can run around with us to 6 of the different booths in each zone. And you can visit those booths and claim wearables in them. In MotoDEX, Marguerite, can you tell me a little bit about what I'm seeing right now in the MotoDEX booth?
Yes, thank you so much. It's really good expo for MotoDEX game. I can say that if you want to try our game more, you can play on a web version, or you can download our app in App Store or Google Play. Our game for mobile and for computer users. Yeah.
And so there's this hyper casual racing game. So give me a little bit behind the mechanics. Like, what are the token mechanics for your game right now?
Our economic strategy is designed to enhance player engagement and value creation. Each new purchase in our MotoDEX game and in NFTs make increase the value of the NFT objects by 1%. You can view the current value of characters directly in the smart contracts. Sure, this dynamic not only incentivize players to actively participate, play, so it's also for invest in the game and ensures that their in-game assets appreciate over time, creation a sustainable game economy and gaming experience.
And I believe that your racers can build racetracks and then own that racetracks when the players are racing on them.
It's hyper casual with game with racing. We have a few tracks. It's more than 10 tracks. It's more than 10 cities like Dubai and in Ukraine, Kiev also, and other countries.
So while we're talking tokenomics, then I want to jump in with everybody and talk a little bit more in depth about the models that are working right now. So I think each of you are coming from these different perspectives, but tokenomics is playing a role across the board. So for you right now, how do tokenomics best play a role in balancing supply and demand in Web3 games? We talk about it a lot within Decentraland. We talk about it a lot within our marketplace. As you can see, that everything that we're wearing and showing on screen right now is an NFT. There's a complex system of tokenomics and economics in all of our environments. So to kind of dive in deeper with you all, like, what do you see as working right now in that careful balance that we all have in supply and demand within Web3? And Jason, can I bring you in first?
Yeah, sure. So I guess I'll point to kind of the more, this is informed kind of from the games right now that seem to be doing really well. I think also Danny mentioned Pixels. I think Pixels has done a really great job. And also, I really like Pirate Nation as well too. And I think, for both games, I think the fundamental thing to start with is, and I know this sounds kind of obvious, but is the game fun, right? Like I think the game has to be fun first. Like that's a absolute requirement, in order for people to even want to spend time in the game, and also to of course sink money or buy tokens within a game, right, to help increase that buy side of the economy. And then I think there's definitely a lot of different tactics. At the end of the day, right, I think the game has to have, and something that I'm designing for our own future games as well too, is kind of like, what are the, can you provide people with enough ways to actually spend money in the game? And that's not actually, that may sound obvious, but that's not actually, I think, such an easy question, because it can be sometimes hard to provide enough compelling things for someone to want to spend into. That's its own kind of like big problem in itself. I think at the end of the day, being able to incentivize and correctly align what you want from the players out of to the objectives that you want as a studio. I think that's what I think Pixels particularly has done really well. Luke has been mentioned, the co-founder or the founder of Pixels has been mentioned as like a tokenomics economist kind of guy more than anything. And I think what they did there was really interesting, is that they really, with subscriptions, they made it, if you had subscriptions, right? If you pay for a subscription, they kind of make you pay in order to withdraw out, which kind of helps solve, was an interesting way to help solve that kind of like token outflow that you saw, with Axie Infinity and other games, play to earn games that, weren't as successful in terms of keeping an economy that lasts. So I think it's more of like almost like a tactical, I would say it's like a tactical question, but there's a lot of different ways, and you have to provide a lot of different ways for players to, incentivize players to buy the token, keep the token, or at the very least stake the token so they're not selling it. in order to kind of make sure that economy is balanced. Like just get that buy side, going, and get the demand side going. That's like kind of almost like the requirement, and that's the problem I think all token designers are kind of thinking through right now.
That's really interesting. So for you, fun number one, and then two, that tactical look at as many ways as possible to buy, keep, stake within the game itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Any other examples that spring to mind? We talked about Pixels. We talked about the great work they're doing with tokenomics really built in from day one into that ecosystem.
Yeah, I think Pirate Nation is another game. And I think what they did well is, so they already had a game, they had a pretty fervent fan base. So they had an NFT going in that people could, own, and then they did their token launch called Pirate recently. And I think what they did really well is they really incentivized people to not sell it right away. I think partly people wanted to keep it because they thought they were really bullish on the project. They thought it would do well. They provided immediate utility in that you could use it to buy things, in-game currency, but also more critically, you could also stake it so that you could earn, I guess their governance token or their kind of company token in the future, which, they delay that further out. So, I think if you look at that, right, you might, I mean, some more critical people might say, oh, well, you're just delaying, like you're staking a token for another token. Doesn't that seem like, kind of like, is that sustainable, right? I think that's a good question. But I think by effectively delaying that the token sales, eventually people will sell over different times, right? But I think the other important thing to worry about is at what's the timing of the sales, right? I think if you're able to smooth that curve out so that not everyone is selling, because you kind of have to distribute it all right away to your community. That's the only fair way to do it. But if you do that, then you really want to avoid people selling it. So if you can kind of lengthen and kind of even out that curve, I think that's something that people like really, that's really helpful, right, for the token price. And I think also what they did well too, and this is also a very big debate that's happening right now, is I think they also launched at a relatively low valuation, lower than people expected. So people are like, oh, this is a good deal. I'm not like, I don't think this is overvalued. I think it's definitely, this company and this game should be worth a lot more. And that's also, I think, a strategy that this is like the newest thing in the past in crypto. Things move very fast. I think this in the past 2 or 3 weeks, people have started been saying actually maybe launching at such a high market cap or high valuation is not good. It's actually better to launch at a lower one. So, there's room to grow and people just don't want to sell right away. And then it's really depressing, right? When the price goes down immediately.
Danny, bringing you in here on the sustainable supply and demand. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to this topic. Maybe I'll just touch on a few. I think Jason said it casually, like, but it's actually not a given in our industry that there's actual utility to the token. Like, there are thousands of tokens launched without even the game or the app being live. So, first thing, have a product. Second, have utility for the token in the product. Those are we kind of have to say it out loud. Unfortunately, it's not a given, but it's a good start. In terms of the tokenomics for launches, we're seeing a lot of tokens that are being dumped early by early investors. So looking at the tokenomics, seeing the investor allocation for earlier rounds and team allocation and the difference, when those tokens are being released is super important when thinking about healthy tokenomics. Upland, for example, from a regulatory perspective, because we're a US-based company, never sold Sparklet, which is the token that we're launching, to investors because we weren't allowed to. So that, on the one hand, opened the door for us from a regulatory perspective to launch the token in general, but is also very healthy for our tokenomics because there are no early investors who are able to dump. It's really the only holders of the token are players who purchased it inside Upland, inside the app when it wasn't still available. So they just bought it for its utility. And we have over 140,000 holders of Upland of Sparklet in Upland. So the second thing, I think there's a heated debate around it in the past month. On Twitter, you're seeing a lot of VCs talking about it, and rightfully so, about the problematic launch pools of exchanges and how they are meant to incentivize usage, but really what they end up is being unwanted liquidity of people who are not really players, but just earn the tokens from the exchanges through the different tasks of the utility pools. And that is when you think of growth, like, okay, well, yay, I can get like more users to download my app initially, and your DAUs are up and you're feeling great, and it's like, okay, growth at any price. But if the price is the dumping of your token 3 weeks later, then it's not worth it. And I think more and more, both the exchanges and the projects and VCs are trying to understand that, and there is a correction coming with the way, of having that it's just not healthy to have 8 to 10 of your supply in a staking pool prior to TGE. But I have to concur with Jason here that the development of utility within the game and the constant development of that utility for the token is super important. And different games have different ways of doing it. I know in Upland, we look at the future of what we're building as open economy. So for us, the future is both UGC and different developers who we're partnering with and giving them a platform, both for visibility and connection to our user base and our economy. And because they are the future, then we work with them to see, okay, how can we contribute? How can our token contribute to your utility? Or how can the existing utility contribute to your game? And I think that's part of the long-term discussion that as an ecosystem we need to have, especially with growing interoperability, both of assets and of tokens. And maybe on that note, just to mention that we gave a few examples. I think Mochaverse, that the token is launching soon, because they have the vastest gaming ecosystem in Web3 gaming, their tokenomics is going to be super interesting to see how they've structured the different pools, how they're incentivizing going to the different games, completing different tasks. And I think there'll be a lot to learn for everyone from how they're launching their tokenomics.
That's super interesting. I'm gonna, Margarita, like when I came across MotoDEX, I think you were one of the top 10 games within Polygon on that radar. And so from your perspective in terms of sustainability and growth, how do you get this balance right? Like, what do you do within your tokenomics to get that sustainable growth, that real sweet spot between supply and demand?
Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, we have a top ranking game in Dapper DAO. We have a lot of users and players, sure. So we each every month we have new tracks. It's a really interesting game experience for our new players. And about our game mechanics and economics, we have 3 main categories of NFT objects in the game. It's the first one is game characters, and the second one is tracks and health capsules. And all of it is NFTs, and each new purchase, as I said, you make increases the value of the NFT objects by 1% for characters, for example. And I can share you info about tracks, some more information, because it can be for investors, for example, because we have tracks in limited edition, and they are sold on smart contracts, and each new sale increases its price by 10%. For characters, 1%, but for tracks, 10%. And right now, players have access to tracks with the background of such world's famous locations. And track owners, it can be for investors, receive income from tournaments on their tracks. When players playing these tracks, investor can earn money for this. Yeah, it's our economy for our players and investors, for example.
If anyone's joining us right now, we're getting into the absolute deep conversation between three really, really clued up experts on Web3 game economies. We're going to jump back to 081 in Plaza to join the crowd. In Decentraland, if you're one of the close to 700 people watching us live right now across the different social networks, whether that's Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, if you can, jump and join us in World. We're going to be at 081 at Decentraland Game Expo Plaza. If you're interested in tokenomics and you want to start diving into the NFT ecosystem, this is an excellent place to start, as is collecting the wearables and emotes that are free to claim across the festival. So I'm going to be diving in to 081. And as I
Hey everyone, it's Kim Bay. Just a heads up, we lost your sound.
Hi, I'm just talking to myself. I'm sorry, everyone. We're going to be diving into 081 right now. So we're going to be returning to Decentraland Game Expo Plaza. We are diving deep into Web3 game economies. So I'm just going to dive right now into 081 to join the crowd at Decentraland Game Expo Plaza. If you are interested in Web3 game economies, stick with us for the next round of questions from our expert panel. So dive with me here. So as we walk into Game Expo Plaza, you can see that we're streaming live on the screens. We're also joined by community members, each of whom are diving into the Web3 ecosystem with collectible wearables, emotes. A lot of our community members are also landowners within Decentraland itself. So coming back to you, Danny, in terms of that sustainable model for Upland, you were talking a little bit about sustainability in your virtual property ecosystem. And I'm sure a lot of our community members would love to dive into that further. Like, how are you making virtual property sustainable right now?
So Upland is different from Decentraland in that we weren't decentralized from day one. Upland has a product development strategy of progressive decentralization that gives us as the game developer studio room to be more flexible with supply and demand based on what we're seeing the economy can hold. So Upland is mapped to the real world. We can open different cities. City opening in Upland is like the biggest minting event. It usually sells out within minutes. We've had, I think it was the highlight was the fastest one was Porto in Portugal that had 72 mints per second and sold out in a few minutes. So we're constantly working with the data, seeing the strength of the secondary market, and the amount of new users coming in, and accordingly we open new cities and or open neighborhoods in new cities, and some of them are what we call FSA, which is a mechanism that is meant only for new users. So because on the competitive nature of city opening makes it really hard for people who are not hardcore uplanders to compete in the minting. Because I mean, our amazing community, like they do research before on like what properties they want to buy, because again, they're mirroring the real world. So there's both a business strategy, but also an emotional connection to a lot of specific for the health of our economy, we've always said Upland is the progressive decentralization allows us to have like a greenhouse of experimentation, optimization of supply and demand. And we know pretty well what our economy can hold at any given time. It's also interesting to see that as we grow, we always believe that the future of our economy again is UGC, is user driven in terms of okay, we sell the land, but the structures that are that are built on that land are built by users. Those structures are used as shops by creators to sell other NFTs. Those NFTs can be used in different games within the ecosystem. So the 10x growth we're going to see, and we're seeing now, and we're investing a lot in that infrastructure, is by the users. So it's really interesting to see that the UGC creators, that we give them complete freedom to mint as many as they want, how they're experimenting with supply and demand, and making sure that even though we have no code minting in Upland, so from a flow perspective, it's not a heavy lift for them. They do have to stake Sparklet in order to construct these, and this also prevents a lot of bot activity and spamming of asset creation, because it requires an energy asset to be staked in order to construct them. So it feels in a way like a real world economy in many ways, because you have creators and they're experimenting with things that it costs them something to manufacture their assets. And if they get it wrong and they don't sell out, then they need to correct, just like anyone in the real world.
And how far involved are you with your UGC creators in advising them about tokenomics, everything that we've been talking about so far?
So I think so IP partners rely very heavily on us and advising on how much and what. A lot of them are not Web3 natives or metaverse natives. A lot of our UGC creators are Upland natives, and to be honest, they know better than us. We actually have community members who created tools that connect directly to the blockchain. So they have analytics tools, and they can really play around with the numbers. They can do simulations. So to be honest, with UGC, a lot of the times they get it done better than us.
That's super interesting. I'm going to flip it again to Jason, and a specific question for you is looking at your players, your users, the people creating, building on your platform. Like, what have you found to be the most effective strategies for keeping them engaged?
Yeah, I think this is kind of goes back to the first question that you asked, but I think what we found is, and having run a few different experiments or different products and learning a lot from each one, I think where we land now is that, and where I land now is that I think, providing players with providing players with an experience that combines obviously fun and enjoyment from the game perspective, but also something to look forward to from an incentive perspective in the form of a token or an NFT or something like that. And I can speak to two specific examples that are kind of interesting. So our latest game, Yomi Block Puzzle, it's a casual puzzle game. There's a raffle every day that players can earn scale and also Bitcoin as well too. So we actually integrated, you can actually earn 2 tokens in our game, not our own token. And so basically, once we didn't have that feature, initially, and actually Bitcoin was also added later. So we saw as we had the core gameplay, that kind of had its own kind of like attractiveness, and people were playing it just for its own sake. But once we added in the scale rewards, and then also subsequently added in the Bitcoin rewards, we saw that retention start to improve as we start to increase provide those rewards. So that was kind of interesting. I mean, it's kind of what you expect, but it was kind of nice to see and validate that that indeed was true. We had also had another experiment, I would say, where it was kind of the very first game that we made. It was a very simple web only experience. It was very Web3. And that was actually pretty interesting as well, because the way that worked was that, it was honestly not even really a game. It was almost just like a web experience. People could come in, they would do this daily check-in, and then they would basically be able to customize like a little haunted house that they would then be able to mint for free at the end of the 1 month event. But that one was really interesting because there was kind of this mint to look forward to at the end. And we did have a free mint to kind of gain almost like an entry pass. It was a PFP, but entry pass into the game. So it was kind of token locked to even play the game, but they could mint something else after. But they had something to look forward to. It was kind of like a fun gamified experience. And actually that we had really, really high retention on our player base for that. We had people really coming every day. They would buy up our NFTs as well so that they could, mint more, later on. And I think that was probably the most effective. And that was the most Web3 native experience as well too. For players. So caveat, that was in 2022, so it was a little bit of a different time. But even now, like I mentioned with previous examples, you do see the more Web3 native approaches, I think, tend to do really well. It's a smaller user base for sure, absolutely. But they are very loyal, and they're also the ones that are willing to spend if they feel like that the game, they're bullish about the game, they like the team, like the community. So yeah, so we kind of saw a couple different approaches. Both worked in their own ways, but definitely I think that leaning more, I would say currently right now, gun to my head, I think Web3, having more of a Web3 approach. If you're building a Web3 game and that's your target audience, I think that is, that's a pretty good way to go, and definitely generates kind of like the highest overall retention and also potential spend, I think, in terms of your audience. But of course, you have to execute really well across all these different, dimensions. But that's how I think currently.
And for you, daily, that incentive every day is the metric that's working the best.
Yeah, for our latest game that we partnered with Scale with, yes, that is working pretty well. Like I mentioned, we see a lot of players, many of the same players coming in. We also have it is catered also for Web2, so there's no wallet sign up required. We do similar to it sounds like to how Decentraland is done. It's pretty obfuscated, so when they come in, they don't necessarily know it's a Web3 game. All the Web3 token withdrawal stuff happens on a website, and the idea is that they come in, they play the game, they're like, oh, this is fun, and they convert to become a Web3 person. Of course, there are some people who have done that, but what we found is that actually it's the Web3 natives that end up really sticking around the most. Even though it is kind of designed so that Web2 people could easily play, but at the end of the day, I think still the Web3 people are the most loyal and the most excited about those aspects of the game.
It's really interesting. I think you can see right now in Decentraland Game Expo Plaza, we're surrounded by a lot of Web3 natives with their NFT collections being displayed as wearables. If you are new to Decentraland, I can see a few default wearables walking around. Talk to the community members. They'll tell you where to find wearables within the plaza that you can claim. You can then wear throughout the expo until we finish at 2 p.m. on Sunday. So we're going to be running now. This is day 3 of the festival. We have day 4 tomorrow, which starts at 2 p.m. UTC Saturday and runs until 2 p.m. UTC Sunday. So if you haven't yet claimed all of your wearables, do jump in and join us at 081. We are coming up on the 10 minutes to go mark. I feel like we could just keep diving into this topic and going into the real nitty gritty of these decisions within utility, these decisions within frequency, within these incentives. I really want to start getting your vision right now. So we're going to dive a little bit into this big question, which is, if you were to give me one big trend you see coming through in Web3 game economies right now, what would it be, and why is it important? So I don't know, would anyone like to take that first, the one big trend?
I can go first. I'll take the hit for everyone.
Awesome.
But I think it's connected to what we discussed before, which is utility. So if NFTs, which are the main revenue driving for Web3 games, are the or were really the driving force of the economies, the evolution of NFTs from simply collectibles to utility is the trend that I foresee both in gamings and in general for NFTs, including communities, are the most important ones. And maybe I'll give a few examples. So we have a lot of features for UGCs, and what we're seeing lately is that existing NFT communities, so communities that gather around a specific PFP project, that are now looking for more and more utility, whether it's for the IP or for their community in general, whether it's a socialization, a place to hang out, a plaza or a cafe in Upland, having their own neighborhood, developing their own games with their IP and using their original PFP collection and staying as a community. And 99% of the time, other than Yuga Labs, no one has the money, the time, or the capacity to build their own metaverse. So I think it's a great opportunity for platforms like Decentraland, Sandbox, and Upland to be able to host these communities, give utility to those existing NFT communities. At the same time, Upland is also working to have all the NFTs within Upland have more and more utilities. So, of course, structures and properties in Upland, you can build structures on them. That structure can be a portal to a game, can be a shop, can be a mint shop, which is like a NFT factory in Upland. But what we've recently announced, and it's really fun. Maybe I'll send the link also. I'll tweet it in our thread. Is that we are now having a specific asset class of property NFTs that come with a built-in game. So those are monuments that are super NFTs. The first one is the Lusail Stadium in Qatar that we built for the FIFA competition that was won by with like a whole gamification around the FIFA NFTs. And that monument has a racing track around it that the revenues from the racing games go to the original NFT holder. And the game that was developed together with the NFT holder, that is Track Hero, is a really fun game that's connected to the NFT. And the royalties from that game, that of course the business model is modular. It could be there could be different ways to for the game owner, the NFT owner to earn from this. But specifically with in this case, it's Track Hero. So with the racing, the revenue goes to the original NFT holder. So now it's not, okay, I own a piece of land. It's I own a piece of land that has a game attached to it. I get to decide what the business model is of the game. I can work with other community members in order to have events in my game, and experimenting with that type of added utility to existing NFTs is something that I'm seeing as a trend that is really exciting. Alongside that, I would also add, because I think it's really important for the ecosystem as a whole, is the interoperability of game assets and how important they are as a trend for the entire economy. So in Upland, for example, if I have an NFT that's minted in Upland, there are different game developers who can utilize that NFT in their games, and it can take a different form in any kind of game. It can be burnt. It can be racing. So let's say if it's a car, it can be racing in one game, or it can be burnt in another game. Like the sky's the limit, right? As long as whatever the developers can use. But from a user perspective, my car NFT doesn't have just a beauty function or a collectible function. It can be used in many different worlds, doing many different things. And that's also a very exciting trend for users.
So for you, those big two: utility, building it into the NFTs, and interoperability, that cross-world compatibility that we're all getting excited about in Web3. Yep. Sorry, I'm just looking to see if we've got Margarita joining us. I think she's had to drop out, but it would have been really interesting to see Margarita's perspective on that, in that MotoDEX has kind of built that into their tracks as well. So having that similar model, racetrack, having the gamers paying into the racetrack to compete on that track, and then the NFT owner of the racetrack being able to benefit from that revenue share too. Jason, I'm going to bring you in. So, big trend for you going forward.
Yeah, there's a number of them. I was thinking about answering while Danny was speaking, and I'll pick the spiciest one just for fun. But so caveat before I talk about it, I think I don't necessarily know exactly how this will play out and if this is actually true, but I do feel like this is something people are starting to talk about. I've talked about this with other founders and even investors. We're VC funded as well, so talk to investors investing in the space as well. And it's interesting. So I think a trend or something that I think people are starting to think a lot more about, especially within gaming, is whether to actually even issue, if you were to start a new game today or a new company today, would you issue an NFT today? I think that's a question that I think people are actually asking. Obviously, I think clearly, there are examples of NFTs in games working, and even today, even though it's a bit of an NFT bear market, they are, definitely games and projects that have done really well. And we have our own NFT as well too as our own company. But I think it is an interesting question, and the reason why I think people are asking these questions is obviously big part is the bear market. On the NFT volumes have gone down. Especially since 2021 highs, it's fallen off quite a bit. But also, I think people are starting to realize like, well, if most teams are looking to do a token, like the token regulatory environment is also improved. So I think part of the reason why people would do a token NFT issuance is because they felt like it wasn't safe to do a token. But it seems like it's starting to be more okay to issue tokens. You're not going to go to jail if you issue a token, even if you're in the U.S. potentially, right? So I think that's starting to change now, right? Especially as the regulation becomes a little bit more clear. So if you're able to launch a token, then you kind of are fracturing your liquidity bases between your NFT and your token. There are ways to connect them together. Speaking of racing games, Photo Finish is a Solana-based, really great Solana-based horse racing game that actually tied their token to an emission of their token. And even the latest, I think even literally today, I think the Beacon, which is an Arbitrum game, pretty I think hyped game on the Arbitrum network, they just issued an NFT. I think it minted out pretty quickly, but I think a big reason why it minted out quickly was not because it was just an NFT with game utility, but it's because they explicitly said, and they're very clear that, oh, this NFT is going to result in, like, I think something like even 15 or 20%, don't quote me on that, but some substantial amount of their token for their future TGE. And I think that's what actually got people most excited. So you're issuing an NFT, but it's really for the token at the end of the day. Even the Pirate Nation example I mentioned, people I think mostly staked it because they're excited about, getting the future token, right? Which is not an NFT, it's also a fungible token. So I think that's a pretty real question people are asking right now. I think even for myself, in our own company, for our next game, that we've been working on for a while, but we have a next game that will be coming out later this year, we are wondering, oh, should we do an NFT or not? And it's definitely a debate. I think there's a lot of benefits to having an NFT in gaming. It's nice to be able to coalesce a community around like a unified, like art style and direction, and something you can kind of rep on Twitter or in Discord, right? I think there's definitely a lot of benefits to it. But before it was like everyone would do it, right? It was not even a question. And now I think it is a very real question for a lot of projects. And I feel like it's pretty early right now. Like I don't think you see it that much on Twitter, people talking about it. But my prediction is that people will be more talking about it more, especially if the bear market continues, at least NFTs. I mean, if all these pick up and are, trading like starts to go pick up a lot again, then I think people will keep issuing NFTs. But if not, if it kind of is the status quo like it has been for the past 6 months or so, I think it will be a question that people will start being more vocal about and asking about. And people are already kind of asking about it and talking to each other, like in private discussions.
Jason, I think that's so healthy though for game development, because you need to ask yourself, for everything that you do I really need this, and can I justify it in the game and from an economic perspective? So just asking those questions I think is very healthy, whether the bear market continues or not.
And
Yeah,
Jason,
yeah.
can you give us the alpha as well? Did you decide for your next game, NFT or no NFT?
That's a good question. Props to you for asking the question. To be honest with you, though, I don't really know for sure. It's actually a debate, internally. Like we're still kind of thinking through that. I think another consideration too is that it's a lot of work, right? And you're also, I think Danny can definitely, I'm sure, appreciate it. But as a founder, right, it's like it's a lot to kind of like you have this whole user base, right, that is very vocal and they can be very beneficial and helpful, but also, sometimes there are toxic members that come from that as well too. And I've seen that even participating in other communities, not even as a founder, but as a founder, is like it's very stressful. And then you have the token side. So now you only have two groups of people that you're like are upset at you, right? And sometimes they're not always aligned, right? What's good for the token is not necessarily good for the NFT sometimes. Of course, there's a way to connect them, but so that's kind of like the issue, right? I think that's something that founders are grappling with. And now that we have about 2 years of experience and kind of seeing like all the results of all the different experiments within crypto gaming, I think that's why people are like wondering. But to be honest with you, it's not like I'm hiding any alpha. I honestly, we're actually still kind of thinking about that and debating the merits of that right now. Yeah.
This has been absolutely fascinating. I feel like we could dive into this, even just this part of it, this decision of NFT or no NFT, these different communities, token holders, NFT holders, land holders, in the case of Decentraland and Upland. Like we could dive into this for another hour at least. It has been an absolute pleasure to have you both and Margarita talking about these key concepts for us at Decentraland Game Expo. I hope we'll get to talk on a future panel at a future expo, because I feel like this conversation could run and run, and it's going to be key to Web3 going forward. So just huge thank you to both of you for being part of Expo this year.
Thank you for having me. Yeah,
Thank
good meeting you
you.
both.
It's a
Thank
pleasure.
you. We are meeting again in Expo in just an hour's time for the Decentraland creator-led game tour, and then in another hour after that, we're going to be looking at future predictions for our final panel of Decentraland Game Expo 2024. Thank you to all community members that have been active in Plaza. I have absolutely loved the photo bombing during the film as well. Shout out to DJ Trax for the dancing. Thank you all, and I will see you at the next session. Goodbye, everyone.